What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and continue learning about how Norway is becoming the richest country in the world. Part 4. If you haven't seen Part 1, 2, or 3, feel free to go check those out first, or stay here in Part 4. That's perfectly fine as well. But so far, we've learned about how Norway became rich. Norway became rich by selling wood, then hydroelectricity, and then by selling oil. And then Norway became too dependent on oil, so Norway decided to create the famous Norwegian Oil Fund. And that is exactly where we're picking up here today. So, with that being said, let's take a look.
The fund was established as a communal sovereign wealth fund owned by the Norwegian state and people, into which the surplus revenues from the state-owned oil company Equinor and taxes on the oil and gas industry would be invested into for the benefit of Norway's future generations. And
wow, this is such a cool thing that Norway has. It's amazing because this particular, wealth fund is famous. I think it's over $1 trillion. Norway is famous for this particular fund. And we learned in part 3, we learned that Norway's economy became too dependent on oil. So Norway decided to diversify into this fund and basically invest in a whole bunch of stuff. And it has worked out incredibly well from what I understand, right?
And to diversify the government and economy away from oil and gas.
Yes.
Strict rules and guidelines were established around the fund's operations. It would invest heavily into global stock markets and real estate in order to diversify away from the Norwegian economy.
Oh, interesting. See, this is a little, kind of dense financial information, maybe boring to some people, but this is really fascinating to me. I want to know, what is Norway, invested in? And apparently Norway focuses in investing in companies and economies outside of Norway to really diversify and get exposed to other markets around the world. That's very, very smart strategy.
And very strict rules were set into place that no more than 3% of the fund's assets could be withdrawn in any given year.
Wow.
Which not only enabled the fund to continue growing and compounding with time, but also disallowed the abuse of the fund's assets by Norwegian politicians.
That's good. So Norway has put laws in place to stop the Norwegian government from exploiting how rich this fund is. They can withdraw only 3% of the fund in a year. I mean, funny enough, how much would that be? $30 billion? It's still a ton of money.
Who would otherwise be tempted into promising to lavishly spend the oil wealth today at the expense of tomorrow in order to get themselves elected. A hallmark of the more autocratic petrostates where unpopular regimes or dictators spend the oil wealth lavishly on their people as a sort of bargain for them to put up with their authoritarianism.
Okay, so other countries have huge wealth funds like this, but they don't have the same laws and discipline that Norway has. It's really amazing. Norway is really, really focused on investing in the future of Norway, caring about the future, which is really, really cool, actually, to see from my American point of view as well, because that's definitely not something we tend to focus on enough in America. We want instant satisfaction, and America prints lots of money, and America takes out massive loans, and as a country, we're in over $30 trillion of debt, I think. It's really a mess, actually. It's really something else. So I have a huge amount of respect for Norway and this fund and the discipline. Yeah.
And as the Norwegian oil and gas industry continued growing and more wealth was deposited into the oil fund, and as the global economy continued growing alongside it, and as withdrawals were capped at no more than 3% per year, the Norwegian oil fund steadily evolved from nothing in 1990 into the absolute behemoth that it is today.
Really? This started in 1990. This is fun. This part is basically all about the Norwegian oil fund, which I've really been curious about. I thought that was how Norway was rich because of oil and the oil fund. That turned out not to be true, as I learned. Norway became rich from wood, hydroelectricity, then oil, then the fund. This started in 1990, like 30 years ago, basically. And it not with a ton of money, but over the course of 30 years, this fund has become incredible. It's like $1 trillion, I think. Is that right?
Currently, the fund is by far the largest sovereign wealth fund in the entire world.
Wow.
Its current net assets exceed more than $1.5 trillion US dollars.
Oh my god. It's 50% more than I thought. It's $1.5 trillion. This is the biggest sovereign wealth fund on the planet, in the entire world. Because the whole topic of this video is how Norway is becoming the richest country in the world. I know Norway is a wealthy country, but it's not the wealthiest in the entire world. And now it's starting to make sense to me how this could become possible. Because Norway's wealth fund, that individual fund, is actually the biggest of its kind in the world. I didn't know that.
And the fund owns an estimated 1.5% of all the shares of all the more than 9,000 publicly traded companies in the world.
Wow.
And is the global stock market's single largest investor today, making the fund the world's biggest stock market whale. This is despite the fact that the Norwegian economy itself only represents about 0.5% of the entire global economy, and despite the fact that the Norwegian population only represents about 0.07% of the worldwide human population.
That's very important, actually. That's very important to point out. Norway has a very small population, but so much money. Like, per person, Norway is the richest in the world, right? If you do it on a per person basis, per capita, I guess you'd call it. Yeah, right?
And yet, they own 1.5% of the global stock market. The oil fund is currently so massive relative to Norway's small population that it's worth approximately $275,000 per Norwegian citizen if they decided to ever cash it all out.
Oh my god.
And it's already reached a point where the fund's conservatively capped 3% withdrawal rate per year can safely provide for about 20% of the entire Norwegian government's annual budget in perpetuity.
Oh my god, this is incredible. The more I learn about this, actually, it makes me think, why don't we have something like this in America? Why don't we have something like this here in the United States? What? I'm very jealous right now. What? Instead, we're in massive debt. Norway pays off 20% of its budget every year just from this fund alone. This is truly amazing, and it must be such a fantastic feeling for Norwegians to have this sense of security and comfort and safety for the future. This fund is going to exist basically forever. You can only take out 3% a year. It's going to go on for generations to come, and it's already at $1.5 trillion US dollars, and that's only going to grow. Man, I can't say enough good things about this. I think I'm so passionate about this because of how financially irresponsible the United States has been, especially recently. And Norway just seems like the complete opposite. This seems like exactly what you want to be doing. So yeah, I mean, it makes me a little depressed, actually. I'm quite jealous of this.
Giving Norway the ability to rely less on the unpredictable fluctuations of oil and gas price revenue to continue funding their government operations and shielding the country from future oil price collapses.
Right.
Now, back to Norway's oil and gas industry. The country controls the 20th largest proven reserves of oil and the 21st largest proven reserves of natural gas.
Wow.
Which have granted Norway the ability to become the world's 13th largest oil producer and the 9th largest gas producer.
This is this is the absolutely extraordinary thing about Norway. What makes Norway very special is that Norway is such a small country, but has so much on the global stage, so much money, so much oil, gas. It's so important. Yet it's very small. It does so much. It's really incredible. It's really unique.
Representing about 2% of worldwide oil demand and 3% of worldwide gas demand.
Right.
But Norway's fairly modest shares of worldwide oil and gas reserves and production are each absolutely dwarfed by Norway's massively outsized shares of worldwide oil and gas exports. Despite only being the 13th largest oil producer and only having the 20th largest reserves, Norway's currently the world's 8th largest oil exporter and is fast approaching the exports of Kuwait in 7th place.
So Norway doesn't have the most oil in the world, but Norway does a lot of exporting. So I guess other countries might create a lot of oil but keep it inside their country. Norway sells its oil and is important for providing oil for a lot of the world, by the sound of it.
Despite Kuwait having 12.5 times more oil reserves than Norway and 50% higher oil production. And it's even more lopsided when it comes to natural gas, where, despite only being the 9th largest producer and only having the 21st largest reserves, Norway is the 4th largest global exporter anyway, only just barely behind the big 3 of the global gas market. The United States, Russia, and Qatar, the latter of which the Norwegians are rapidly approaching a takeover of to become one of the new top 3 in the global gas industry.
I didn't even think about gas for a long time. I've heard about Norway and oil. I didn't know it was also right up there with natural gas as well, right up there.
Now, Norway has been able to achieve this massively outsized presence in its share of global oil and gas exports due to several different factors. The first of which is, of course, its close proximity to the energy-hungry European Union, and its ability to construct subsea pipelines directly from source to consumer. The next factor is Norway's own small population that naturally has a lower energy demand than countries with similar reserves but much larger populations.
Right. Oh my god. This is so fascinating to me. I love this. Explains it so perfectly. How is Norway exporting so much oil compared to other countries? Norway has all these pipelines that connect it to Europe, the rest of Europe, and Norway is a small country, so Norway doesn't need a lot of its oil. It's free to sell it, all the extra. Oh man, that makes so much sense.
Like Angola, Ecuador, and Azerbaijan, while the third and arguably biggest factor is a result of Norway's own geography and strategically chosen policies. Norway produces enough renewable hydropower through all of its rivers and dams to power 95% of the country's electricity demand.
What? Really? This is really, like, seriously, Norway is really impressing me today. It just does everything right. So Norway sells most of the oil. Norway doesn't even use it. Norway uses hydroelectric power for 95% of its electrical need. That is so incredible. Like, this isn't an accident either. Like, Norway has clearly been very intentional, very strategic in doing all of this on purpose. It's very, 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 very smart people in Norway, like, making this happen.
And in addition to having the largest hydro potential in Europe, the country also has one of the largest wind potentials as well.
Really?
The coasts around Norway and the mountains that run along the country's spine are among the windiest locations to be found on a continent that is generally not a very windy place.
And Norway is in a perfect position for wind power. Is Norway just, like, the perfect country? Is it just, do I have to say it? Like, Norway has water for hydroelectricity, water and dams, fjords. Norway has wind, because it's on the coast, for wind power. Norway has the oil in the water. Norway really, like, is this just the perfect place to be?
So, in addition to having the 7th largest installed hydroelectric capacity in the world, Norway already has the 18th largest installed wind capacity in the world as well.
Wow.
And has a massively untapped potential here that is only just starting to grow.
Wow.
So, in addition to having pretty large amounts of oil and gas, the country also has huge amounts of renewable energy potential as well.
Wow.
And they've been using that potential to their strategic advantage.
Yeah.
They effectively keep all of their renewable hydro and wind resources in-house to meet their own energy demands indefinitely,
Yeah.
which has freed them up to sell most of their oil and gas resources that they don't really need to outsiders abroad,
Yep.
and especially to the energy-hungry EU directly next door.
Yep.
And in addition to harnessing their local hydro, wind, and even geothermal potential to effectively turn their entire electric grid into 100% domestically produced renewables,
Yep.
they're also reducing the amount of fossil fuels their country consumes even further by offering generous tax and financial
Yep.
incentives to their citizens to adopt fully electric vehicles or EVs as well.
Yeah. This is also something that Norway has become famous for, adopting electric vehicles faster than basically anywhere else. Norway is known for all the electric vehicles and the infrastructure. It's really incredible. Norway has set it up so there's all this renewable energy inside of Norway. So Norway's energy needs are met. Norway can sell all the extra oil. And Norway has the $1.5 trillion wealth fund just making money every year, too. It's really the perfect setup.
As a result, a whopping 88% of all new car sales in Norway across 2022 were EVs,
Wow.
which is by far the highest market share that EVs have yet achieved in any country in the world today.
Oh, so Norway is the highest electric vehicle country in the world. I thought so. Now I know for sure.
And since these pro-EV policies have been being pursued within Norway for a long time now, nearly 1 in every 3 vehicles on Norwegian roads are already EVs that don't consume any oil and are powered instead by the state's domestic and renewable hydro, wind, and geothermal resources.
Wow.
And for Norway, this is about far more than simply reducing emissions and combating climate change. It's also about national security and financial power. The more that the Norwegian electricity grid became powered by renewable sources from within Norway, the more secure the country became from having to rely on foreign energy imports and supply chains, and the more of their own oil and gas resources they could sell abroad, and the more cash they could plow into their sovereign wealth fund to diversify their economy further away from oil. And
yeah, that's a good way. That's a good way of summing it up. And a good point. Norway is not relying on any other country to survive, which must be a really, really great feeling. That Norway is totally self-sustainable, basically. That's what it sounds like.
And the more EVs that get adopted within the country that can be indefinitely powered by their domestic renewable sources, then the even more of their domestic oil resources they won't need and can sell abroad as well to continue plowing even more money into the sovereign wealth fund to diversify even more away from oil.
Yeah, it's a really, really good situation to have.
It is a cascading strategy that has been diligently followed in Norway for decades, that is steadily transforming the country into one of, if not the, most powerful and influential states in Europe. It is thus Norway's unique 21st century philosophy and doctrine that its oil and gas resources are to be produced and sold to foreigners, while its renewable resources are to be harnessed and provided for the needs of the Norwegian people.
Okay, so that's literally Norway's philosophy. Is that Norway is going to continue to create oil and gas, but Norway really wants to sell it and sell it to other countries. And within Norway, Norway is focusing on renewable forms of sustainable energy that Norway will use, but sell the oil to other people. That's a very, very nice situation.
This clever and unique strategy has set them up to be capable of selling and exporting virtually all of the oil and gas that they produce, while simultaneously being completely energy independent at the same time, which is how Norway's modest global oil and gas reserves and production levels take up so much more of the world's total exports, and how the country has gotten so spectacularly wealthy in the process.
Oh my gosh. This is something. This is something else. I think I have to stop it here for now because we've been going at this for a while. This is a super enjoyable video. I'm really learning a lot about Norwegian history and like Norwegian economy. And it's fascinating to me. I didn't know any of this stuff. I don't think, man, Americans really don't know about any of this. And I feel like we could learn so much from what Norway is doing. Seriously. So I think I'm going to stop here for now, and I will continue this very long video series in part 5, I guess. But if you've enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like or leave a comment with your thoughts on any of these topics here today. And if you're interested in part 5 of this, or just more videos like this in general, me reacting to Norway and Norwegian culture and learning things about Norway, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.